Welcome to I Wish I Knew, a DisruptED TV podcast. Today we're talking with Ira Socol from Virginia. As you know, this is a show where educators share a time when they jumped into something and wished there was one thing they could have known that would have helped out. Ira, what story do you want to share with us today?
Well, Chris, I think the story I have to share is this. Is that there's an absolute need, and I wish I had known earlier how to dig through the technologies that can help everybody achieve what they want to be. And I'll say that, I began in special education as a student in special education for reading issues, for attention issues, for behavior issues. It took a long time for me to figure out how any form of education could work for me. I have to say that when I became a New York City police officer back in the 1980s, the New York City Police Academy was the first organization to teach me about, the availability of any kind of book in audio form. And I could use that. Later, when I was trying to finally get my bachelor's degree, I was in a situation where I worked for the technology department at the university to finance my education, and I was given the opportunity to start looking for technologies that might help students like myself.
Wow.
Through all of that process, I developed what I think is the important thing, and I call it tool belt theory, and people can look it up online. But tool belt theory says that the most important thing students can learn, and this began with special ed, but it's really every student, the most important thing they can learn is how to make the world work for them. And I realized at the time that when students in special ed were given technologies, they were given one technology, as if I was trying to cut wood and somebody gave me one saw, and it didn't matter whether I was trying to make crown molding or cut up firewood. There was only one saw that was handed to people.
Right.
I realized very quickly as I began looking through all these technologies to put together a program at Grand Valley State University in Michigan that I was using multiple tools as the day went on, depending on what the task was that I had to do, what environment I was in, where my skills stood at the moment. But then here's the answer to your question. I called this originally TEST for tools, environment, skills, your skills at the moment. And the last thing is the tools, which is that if you don't know what tools are out there, you can't, of course, choose them.
Right.
The key thing for special ed kids is that we have no idea what tools will be available as they go forward into life, and that's true of all of us. So the key thing is, how do you learn to learn the tools that will help you manipulate the world so that you can work with it to your advantage?
That's a great question. How do we learn to learn the tools? Excellent. What did you discover?
Well, I discovered that there's a primary goal as anybody approaches this, which is what they have to say is, how do I go out and investigate? Now, there's so much in the technology world that you can't investigate everything. So you have to start to understand yourself, know your comfort zone, and know what kind of things appeal to you. But perhaps one of the most important things, because one of the things I think for special ed kids who often feel very isolated, is they need to be fully connected with the greatest size world they can so the information will flow to them. If I had simply limited myself, for example, to what I needed for reading at the time in the late 90s that I was going with this, I really wouldn't have found anything, because everything that existed at the time was done for the blind. And the way a blind person navigates text and the way a dyslexic person navigates text are of course, radically different.
Yes.
Even though the some of the technology would be the same, but by being in touch with the biggest group of people I could find, I found solutions. For example, and I'll make this quick, but I was at the Cal State Northridge Conference on Technology and Persons with Disabilities. This goes way back, maybe 2004 or something. And I was in a session being led by someone who was blind, and I noticed that they had an earphone in all the time that they were presenting. And I went up to him after and said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "I'm using a tool that was just created in Britain called PowerTalk, which allows me to hear all the PowerPoint slides so I know I'm on the right slide."
Wow.
Well, this was a magnificent discovery for me, because everybody knows I was a grad student at the time, and even though I was a grad student in the special education department at a great university, professors would pump out PowerPoints all the time that I couldn't read while I was in the class. So now I had an answer to that, and it's that thing of exploring widely and being part of the greater world that I think is my biggest takeaway.
Wow. So I guess my question would be, how has this changed not only how you handle new situations, but how has it changed the way you approach students, or more importantly, how do you approach teachers and supervisors who maybe have a narrow understanding of this and really need to expand their thinking on this?
I have really tried to aggressively explain a sort of what I would consider a radical version of what universal design for learning looks like. For instance, when I worked in Albemarle County, one of the things we did was, working with Pam, is every single one of the laptops we gave to every child from 3rd through 12th grade had every single tool we could sort of put on it. So we had tool packages for people to pick. We said we will never create an environment, a digital environment, that doesn't have at least 3 different ways available to do anything. Whether you want to read text, dictate text, do this, do that. We want to make sure that there's always choice. Now, what's obvious at first is the limited group of choices that we can make and pre-install and, get everything in place. But then, and this required a lot of learning on teachers' part and a fabulous technology department that made it work, we made sure that every student was the administrator of their own computer. So if they found something better online, they could add it. We may be one of 5 schools in school systems in the entire country that does that, but that is the heart of it, is us not saying we're going to screen your choices, we're just going to help you make those choices. Wow,
Ira, that is such an alarming, I say alarming because most of us work in the school systems that have so many constraints, and to give that, they wouldn't even give that freedom to a teacher, never mind relinquish it to a student. That is just amazing. So the takeaway is that given the choice and the freedom to make those choices, children can really access learning and then thrive.
And we've seen radical success stories because of it. Kids would never have succeeded without it.
Wow. Ira, I really want to thank you for spending time with me this morning.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
No, my pleasure. We've been talking with Ira Socol from Virginia this morning, and we hope that you'll join us again when we talk about I Wish I Knew on DisruptED TV podcast. Thanks for listening.